what companies are doing today in the zero trust, right? And so I think that we can kind of combine this section in the next couple of sections, where the discussion here is really around what areas can organizations focus on, right? Like to kind of begin their journey, and as they mature parts of their infrastructure, what to think about and what to kind of see what comes next. So maybe we'll start with you, Chris, and let's start from the perspective of user and devices, and we talked a little bit about identity, we talked a little bit about access. Just sort of give us your perspective on that journey for zero trust, from the perspective of users and devices.
Yeah, so I think where someone could go and start right after this webinar, right, is going to your authentication system, whatever that directory service might be. If it's not turned on, turn on MFA, right? That's, I think, a first housekeeping step. It's gotten a lot better. Yes, there's 20 odd MFA apps you can install on your phone. I think I've got 7 or 8 on my own, but that's a really easy, quick step to say you are who you say you are, right? When it comes to networks, right? Another thing you can dial up there is the device itself, and I equate networks and devices now, since we're all remote, kind of in the same place, right? So what network are you coming from? Do you normally connect to our environment through Comcast or Cox Cable or whoever, or now you're suddenly in France, right? That's an indicator to do more authentication of that event. A lot of systems have these capabilities in place, regardless if you're on Google or Office 365. Yes, you might have to purchase a tool to get some of those features in place, especially on the device side. If you're, say, migrating from a legacy VPN to CASB or something like that. So I think those are really easy steps to turn on immediately in your environment, that start you on that journey, right?
That makes sense. And Fred, so Chris talked a little bit about devices. You kind of touched on networks and potentially even in IaaS environments, workloads, right? Like that. There's also need to think about that journey, and so maybe comment a little bit about that part of zero trust and the networks and cloud infrastructure in general.
Yeah, so I think good feedback on, hey, locality matters, who you are matters, how we help characterize that matters to help determine what you should have access from, and then what you have access to. And sort of relatable to that, typically one of the things to think about there is also how do we relate single sign-on. So how do we think about trust models for things like SAML assertions for cloud? I have a bunch of IAM policies in AWS. Okay, I have a lot, right? Most people have a lot, or they have overly prescribed things, or whatever the case may be. Some of the things that we think about here is, how do I tie that to a role? How do I make that focused on what this person's responsibility in the organization is? I think one of the things that's really, every time I have the good fortune of showing up at a new company to work on some new cool problems with people, I spend some time going through an access control matrix, right? What do people need to do their jobs? And fundamentally, we always, as humans, sort of get in this mind, should I have access to this thing or should I not? Let's not worry about that. Let's just capture where we are, right? And start from there. And we'll look for consistencies. The same way Chris talked about with respect to where you're coming from as to where you're going to. People that do this kind of work need to go to these typical types of resources. We can very easily look at both flow data. So, here, anything that you look at in the cloud, for example, where you're looking at your VPC flow logs, or you're looking at and associating this with your CloudWatch and CloudTrail logs, give you a very clear indication of what people generally do and need to do their job. So you also have that level of orientation to be able to characterize those roles and push that to single sign-on to make it easy for people. I think that's a pretty critical element.
Awesome. So this is really a stimulating conversation, and we're starting to get questions in. So also just a reminder for folks that might have joined a little later, feel free to put questions into the chat window. We want this to make this as conversational, and we can wanted to answer as many as your question, not just the sort of the prepared remarks that we have. One came in on, just from someone from basically an attendee who said that, hey, they're part of a startup, security in a startup, you're focusing on just kind of getting the product out the door. You're just trying to figure things out. Security is probably not something top of mind, and it's something where the people ask like how possible is it to incorporate sort of that security mindset, and how realistic is it to do so. So Chris, you wrote a book, right, on this very topic. I figured we'll start with you, given that you've seen both very large and very small companies, and so maybe some tips and tricks on what folks in very early stage startups can do.
Yeah, I think it is very achievable, very within reach, regardless of the size of the organization, whether it's you as the first security hire or you as the founder, right? So something Fred just mentioned was taking stock, right? You really need to understand first before you implement anything, make changes, is really understanding the environment. What is it that you need to focus your personal time and limited time on in that organization, right? So one of the first things that give a great concrete example here, maybe it'll resonate with folks. So when I joined Crossbeam, had a couple months of conversations, but I didn't know all the technical ins and outs of, okay, where do I need to apply security first? At limited time, limited budget, what do I need to focus on first? Start from the inside, right? Our data, right? Our customer data, where does that live? I need to know where it is, right? Where in AWS? Is it just in RDS database? Are there snapshots? And then who has access to that, right? Layering on, we've mentioned multiple times, multi-factor, turn that on in AWS. Easy win right there. Most engineers are familiar with it, so shouldn't be a lot of friction. But I really needed to know, yes, the person running this command is that person, right? So we put together, again, this is part of being in engineering and being in cybersecurity. Not all systems just plug into each other. So looking at the user activity on their device that we know is their device, that's managed in our MDM and has our security stack installed. Are those commands matching up with what we're seeing in our CloudTrail logs, right? Did that command for dumping an entire Postgres database, did that actually show up in our environment, right? Sounds a little complex, yes, but that is the concept of zero trust. So we've authenticated the person, right? But just because you've got MFA, there obviously or most people know about the flaws in SMS. There's vulnerabilities there. It's not completely secure. So if that is an option, I still want to know that command actually came from that user's device. But then going another step, okay, is their device compromised, right? Did that person actually run that command? So looking at window information, what process ran that command? Was it from the CLI? Was it from some weird child process that spawned out of Chrome? Something like that, right? And that goes to having tooling in place like a endpoint protection product or endpoint detection response product where you get that telemetry and you can match it up with the existing telemetry in your cloud environment. So there's a lot of steps you could take. That was my first step, is where's our data? That's the most important thing we're focusing on. And then I can work my way out from there.
Please subscribe and check out more content from us.